welcome to the Aussie Football Passport, your one-stop pod for Aussie men and women footballers who are playing their club careers abroad. I'm your host, Alex, but this is a special show. We have got the preview for the Matildas Asian Cup campaign coming up in very shortly, I should say. And to help me out with this show, I have a special guest from Dubcast. I've got Poletti. Poletti, how are you?
Any day I get to talk football is a good day. And with the Asian Cup just around the corner, uh, I've spent enough time talking about all of the other nations. So it'd be nice to just hone in on the Matildas for a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's what we want to do. We want to talk about the Matildas mainly, and we'll do a little bit of the opposition towards the back end. But let's focus on the mighty Matildas and whether they can win this thing. So, Poletti, I might get you to start. Just give our listeners a plug for the Dubcast. Where can they find you and your wonderful work?
Yep. So the Dubcast, you can find us on all the major podcasting platforms. You can also find us on YouTube. We're putting out we put out new episodes every Wednesday most weeks during the A-League women's season. Off season gets a little bit tricky because of the nature of women's football in this country. There's not always there's not always news coming out to talk about, unlike the men's off season where there's a story or two every week, even in the off season. So we do try to put out content regularly. And during the Asian Cup, we are planning on doing daily episodes around the tournament. But feel free to check us out. We'd be more than happy to have all the company that wants to tune in. Myself and Burke will be running the show primarily, and we'll have guests in throughout the tournament as well.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, definitely go check out Dubcast. They do a wonderful job of covering women's football here in Australia, and power to them, particularly with the Asian Cup coming up. There's going to be plenty of good content for the show, no doubt. So let's get into it, Poletti. Let's get your thoughts on the squad, first of all. Were there any glaring omissions or players that you wanted to see that weren't picked?
I mean, there's always players that I want to see that aren't picked. That doesn't necessarily mean they're glaring omissions per se. Look, I've been on the Sasha Grove bandwagon for quite some time, but she's got a lot of depth or a lot of players in front of her to compete with. So I think at least I hope she'll be one of these post tournament players. Izzy Gomez, I think, was a little bit stiff to miss out. Joe Montemuro did say there was a few A-League women players that were, it was hard to leave them out of the squad. In his squad announcement press conference. So hopefully that's going to give some indications, post Asian Cup as to where some of the newer players might come from. As players retire and and whatnot. Charlie Grant, look, obviously injured. Just missing out. I think another week or two before the tournament starts, and she's probably there. So it's just unfortunate for her. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's too many glaring omissions. This is probably the best squad on paper that Joe could have selected. I was definitely surprised to see Alex Chidiac. I think a lot of people were surprised to see Alex Chidiac because she's kind of flown under the radar since she left Melbourne Victory, went to Como. But that's the beauty of the way Joe Montemuro wants to play football is, unlike under previous coaches, someone like an Alex Chidiac can thrive under Montemuro because she's a player that doesn't necessarily fit some traditional systems, I'll say, in terms of tactics and formation. But Joe has said that he's very flexible and it's a very fluid formation, and you can't really define it by like a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-4 or a 5-4-1 or whatever. Like it's very fluid. So that gives someone like an Alex Chidiac a very good chance to thrive, probably off the bench, I'd say. But I reckon there's there will be a game here where she'll probably start. Just don't ask me which one.
Yeah. It'll no doubt depend on the opposition and potentially the fitness of Mary Fowler, you'd think, right?
That's an interesting one because I don't think they're going to play the same position. I think,
Okay.
look, we haven't seen how Joe Montemurro wants to use Mary Fowler because obviously she's been injured.
Mm,
I think, I think we saw her play her best for the Matildas under Tom Samani in the window just before she got injured at right wing in those South Korea games. So I'd like to see Fowler get a chance there. You know, maybe like a Razzo Fowler 1-2, start whichever. I'm not fast, and let Chidiac do her own thing. I don't necessarily think they're like for like replacements. Certainly very
mm.
dynamic players, but I don't think like for like.
Yeah, they've probably got different profiles, I guess, and it can almost get a little bit confused because Fowler's played a lot centrally, and I guess Chidiac sort of that's the role that she's played at club level, even though they are two different profiles of player. So I guess that's probably where the confusion is. But you're right, Poletti. I think that that right wing role for Fowler is something that she could certainly do quite well, and maybe allow them to both play together in a very fluid sort of attacking front third setup for the Matildas, as he said, which is what Joe Montemurro wants to do. So it could be. I mean, the options are endless, aren't they, in that front third for the Matildas at the moment, which is fantastic to see. I guess long gone are the days of the over reliance on Sam Kerr, right?
Yeah, and that's almost been by default, like because obviously Sam Kerr was out for nearly 2 years with with those multiple injuries. Look, uh, I don't. Yeah, it's tough, right? Like she's clearly still the best striker available, but I want to see Holly Mack step up throughout this tournament. I want to see, you know, I can't even say Michelle Heyman step up because she's done it so often for
Yeah.
the Matildas. But I want to see her. I want to see her shine again in this tournament in whatever role she plays, and it'll more than likely be an off the bench role, deep in games. But yeah, when Holly Mack is given the chance, I want to see her shine and show that she is the heir apparent to the number 9 spot. If that's the way Montemurro sees her as well, which I can't imagine he wouldn't.
Yeah, you'd think so, and actually the perfect segue there, Poletti. It's almost as if we planned it. I was going to ask for listeners that aren't as familiar with the A League Women's and particularly Holly Mack and Michelle Heyman. Let's start with Holly Mack first of all. What can we expect from her? What sort of player is she, and how do you think she'll fit in this Matilda's setup for the Asian Cup?
So Holly Mack she's going to be a replacement for Sam Kerr off the bench. Like there might be a game or two where she starts, but for the most part, it's she'll be there as a replacement. Which I certainly don't have any sort of problems or qualms or issues with. I think that's more than fair. She'll take the game on. She'll attack oppositions. A phrase that Burke and I have thrown around quite a bit is that she has no self-preservation skills because she's just always going into challenges and she's always giving it 110%, right? But like her footballing IQ was great. She knows where to be. She knows when to make the run. She knows when to pass it off. Like, and so I can, like I said, I think this will be a very much a breakout tournament for Holly McNamara, and should hopefully at least get her on the way to being a household name in Matilda's circles. And I should hopefully encourage people to come watch her at Melbourne City while you still can, because look, I don't think she's too much longer for the dub. As much as I'd love to watch her for another 12 months, I very much think she's gone at the end of the season.
Yeah, okay, there you go. And that's brilliant. And that's ultimately, what we want to see, isn't it? We want to see our best um, ladies go through the A League Women's and progress to the international stage. much like, I guess, a lot of the leagues around the world, you're ultimately aiming to get to one of the top European leagues, and hopefully that can certainly be the case for Holly Mack. Now, to the other end of the spectrum, to another A-League women's player, Michelle Heyman, no doubt probably her last tournament, I think it's fair to say. What sort of role do you think she'll play in this tournament?
Oh, I think it'll very much be a subs role off the bench. Maybe start a game, in a heavily rotated squad. But it depends on what Joe Montemiro wants to do, right? Like, and I think that's ultimately the answer. I think a big part of the reason Michelle Heyman is still there, uh, is because there's been no one else in the last few years that is fit and healthy at the moment. That's sort of, can be that back to goal number 9 that you want, that real poacher sort of striker that she's done so many times before. And you got to remember, like, Michelle Heyman completely retired at a few years back, and she's come out of retirement both at domestic and international level. Um, it's like, so it's, she's, I don't want to say borrowed time because that feels like the wrong phrase, but, like, she's been given this second lease of a Matildas career, of an A-League women career, by coming out of retirement. And I'd love to see her. I'd love to see her shine here again at this tournament, but I think she'll have a very limited role off the bench, which is not a problem. As we saw at the World Cup, much to the chagrin of a lot of players and fans, and everyone, is that Gustafsson used a very select amount of players, and that's unfortunately what happens sometimes at tournaments. I think we'll see a little bit more here, and I can think we'll see Michelle Heyman get opportunities at different points, but Joe Montemiro will very much pick his spots.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like Michelle will play that. Yeah, I guess that's sort of either thrown on in the last 5-10 minutes as we're throwing the kitchen sink to try and win a game. That's the kind of role I guess I foresee her playing, and I think it sounds like you sort of agree there, Poletti. So now, quickly, one last player from the A-League Women's that is in the squad, and again, probably very unlikely to get any minutes, is Chloe Lincoln in goals there, Brisbane Roar goalkeeper. I guess she's probably the next in line for the goalkeeping role, right? And this is about getting her tournament exposure. That's why she's been included, alongside, of course, the unfortunate injury to Tegan Micah. Would you say that's probably fair to say that Chloe Lincoln's next, sort of that fourth down the pecking order of goalkeepers in Australia at the moment?
Yeah, she's. I'd say, if you're wording it like that, yes. this is this is such a this is such a tough thing to talk about. I have been very critical of Chloe Lincoln this season. She has not had a good A-League women's season. I think, like, there have been several key mistakes that have led to Brisbane Roar conceding goals and dropping points in games, but she's the one who has caps ultimately.
Yeah.
And Sally James, who I'd argue is the next one, or who should be the next one off the rank, doesn't have any caps. Jada Wyman doesn't have any caps. Look, if Jada Wyman goes another tournament without a Matildas cap, just I might retire. Like, it's so annoying. As someone who was a massive fan of Jada Wyman, who watched her for years at Sydney FC, be one of the best goalkeepers in the competition, to just have never had a Matildas cap. And I think, look, because today, as of the time of recording, Mackenzie Arnold did not take training. A Football Australia spokesperson said that Arnold was in the gym when asked. That I did read that. I read that in the Sydney Morning Herald article.
Yep.
But yeah, so that was yeah. So doesn't it's unclear. Who's
Mm.
gonna start, when they're gonna start, what they're gonna do. I mean, Mackenzie Arnold should be the default number one at this point, but it's an unknown, and so it's. I mean, there is every chance we'll see Chloe Lincoln playing games at this Asian Cup purely by being forced into playing games at this Asian Cup. But yeah, I definitely look if she can, and she had a decent game against Adelaide last week, before the Women's Asian Cup break. Did concede a couple of goals, but made some fantastic saves. And if you were ever going to get confidence building back in a loss, that that is certainly the sort of game you'd want to have. I mean, ideally you'd want to have that sort of performance in a win, but
Mm.
it is what it is at the end of the day. So yeah, it's an interesting and ongoing situation. So I think that's all I can really say on that, unfortunately.
No, that's fine, Poletti. I think you've done an outstanding job of sort of putting the lay of the land out there. I did. I'm not sure if you also saw it, but I saw that Morgan Aquino has been drafted in last minute as well. I'm not sure if that's just like a training thing or if there really is a concern there for Mackenzie Arnold. Which, I mean, to lose the two, I guess, top keepers to injury would be a pretty devastating blow, wouldn't it?
It would be. I think it's just the fact that she's in Perth. Morgan Aquino, she's international break at the
Yep.
moment.
Yep.
USL is on international break because it is a FIFA international window this
Hmm.
weekend. And so she's obviously in town. Presumably she would have been one of the players on the shortlist that coaches and federations have to submit ahead of international windows and tournaments and stuff like that. So, yeah, I just imagine it's there purely in a train-on capacity. That being said, like there's every chance we could wake up tomorrow and Mackenzie Arnold misses Asian Cup and Morgan Aquino, is the keeper coming in and like look, touch on wood, that's not going to happen.
Mm.
Just yeah, as I said, it's very much a very fluid situation, I think.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that one. Let's hope that Mackenzie Arnold is okay. But I guess if the opportunity presents itself, Morgan Aquino is also a pretty handy keeper, pardon the pun. So, all right, cool. Well, look, I think we've covered off that part. I think in summary, the depth in this side is quite strong, isn't it? It's crazy. I mean, I guess going to your point before about Tony Gustafsson and playing a very few, a very small amount of the players that he selected for that World Cup. I don't think that Montemuro has that issue, really, does he? The quality in this side is just it's come on quite a lot. And I guess for you, Poletti, wouldn't be as surprised by that, considering that you're watching the A-League women's week in, week out. But for our fans, I guess that maybe aren't doesn't have, I guess, as intimate a knowledge of the A-League women, is that, I guess, a true reflection of the quality of the league and the I guess the young players that are coming through the league and I guess where it's going in the next sort of couple of years.
Yeah, look, I mean, as to reiterate, as Joe said, there were some players that play, here in the A League Women who were very hard done by to miss out, um, including one who's currently not eligible for Australia, even though she should be. At least in my opinion, as soon as FIFA decide that Kayla Morrison is eligible to play for the Matildas, I'm sure that Joe will be putting her into the squad, but I can see, yeah, I can see, as you said, there's a lot of depth in this squad. I can see there being a lot of rotation throughout this tournament. Joe will pick his spots to rotate. He's not going to rotate for the sake of rotating. Everything that he does will be tactical. And yeah, like I said, I think look, the future is very very bright. As you said, I watch a lot of the A League women. I know Joe Montemuro watches the A League women every week. Every time that like we've got our photographer for Round Ball Australia down in Melbourne, or one of our photographers, and they're at A League Women games. I always check. As soon as I get the album come through, I'm checking to see, right, what's Joe wearing this week? Who is he talking to? Who is he like? Because there's always a Joe Montemuro photo in there if he's at games. So I know Joe is very well aware of what the future's coming through the A leagues, and I imagine he's going to have he's going to be spoiled for choice after the Asian Cup as we build towards the Women's World Cup pending qualification. For those who aren't aware, this tournament does double as World Cup qualification. It will be the last time that the Asian Cup doubles as World Cup qualification in the women's game for the next cycle. There will be dedicated World Cup qualifying. So that's an improvement and a sign that the game in Asia is growing, or the women's game in Asia is growing. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thank you, Poletti, and thank you also for that gem as well. That the World Cup qualification is doubling up here or I've got that around the wrong way. The Asian Cup is doubling up as World Cup qualification. So, yes, and it's everyone that gets through to the quarterfinals, if I'm correct. The top four go through. Is that right?
Okay, yeah. Okay, so to make it through to the quarterfinals, you're guaranteed for qualifying. If you if you win your quarterfinal matchup, you're automatically through to the Women's World Cup. If you lose your quarterfinal matchup, those 4 teams will be playing 2 playoff games on the Gold Coast, which will be on the 19th of March. The winners of those 2 games will go through to the World Cup. The losers of those 2 games will go into the Interconfederation playoffs ahead of the World Cup for another chance to make the tournament. So top 8 will at least make qualifying. Top 4 automatics, which goes down to top 6, quote unquote. Win your playoff game, you're in, and then there's 2 more second chance, third chance spots. And it's something that's sort of gone under the radar. And talking with a couple of people about this, the fact that that fact has gone under the radar, that there's still there's not as many people talking about it. And it took us 50 minutes into our Asian Cup preview on the Dubcast to actually bring that fact up. So we're people who talk about this on a regular basis, and it took us almost an hour to bring that up. So that should give you an indication of just how far down the radar that that little factoid has gone.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, it's such a unique thing, isn't it? And it's great to see that the Asian Confederation is now, I guess, expanding the program, if you like, or actually giving the World Cup qualification process its own unique platform, rather than bundling it in with another tournament. And I guess another issue is the prize money, but let's not go there, because they're still a bit dinosaur-like there at the Asian Confederation. Let's put it that way. So baby steps it seems to be with them, unfortunately. But yes, and also look, it adds a couple of extra games to the tournament, doesn't it? It gives those teams that don't progress through to the to the semifinals, I should say, another chance at a competitive game to try and, I guess, add to or get through to the World Cup, which of course is the holy grail of football, isn't it? So
it does. I mean, some would argue it's the Olympics, but in terms of particularly in the women's game, some might argue it's the Olympics. But it's the World Cup, it's the Olympics. Look, it's an extra game, certainly helps, but it also changes the complexion of the group stage, because obviously top 2 from each group go through, but then you've got 2 third place, the 2 best third place finishers that will go through. So it creates that extra jeopardy for those last 2 spots, which means hopefully more excitement on match day 3s. Particularly as the tournament starts to hit towards the pointy end of the group stage. So that can't be discounted as well.
Yeah, so that final match day of the group stages will be one to watch out for, won't it? There'll be lots of, as you said, lots of jeopardy. There'll be places on the line and qualification and all of that great stuff that we've seen in past, I guess, international tournaments that have a setup where I guess that progression to the next stage is all based on that last match day, which is fantastic, and it's exactly what we want. We want competitive games. We want to see some good quality football, and I'm sure we're going to get both of those. All right. Now, speaking of opposition, let's do a quick analysis of the opposition. I guess, Poletti, who do you think is the biggest threat in the Matildas group?
I mean, the obvious answer is South Korea. So that is the obvious answer. That's not to say the Philippines and Iran should be taken lightly, and I certainly think, just despite what happened in Olympic qualifying a couple of years ago, the Philippines could present a banana skin challenge for the Matildas, and so could Iran. To be fair, there's like by virtue of being the host nation, the Matildas are supposed to have an easy, supposed to have the easiest group, but there's actually a somewhat difficult group. Look, all it's going to take is one slip up, and suddenly, I mean, to be fair, that might also make for easier tournament progression, which we'll get into a little bit later. But
Hmm.
it's certainly not as breeze through, get 3 wins from 3, make the quarters, and waltz your way through to the semis, likely against Japan. We'll touch on that a little bit later. Uh,
Hmm.
so yeah, on paper, it's South Korea, but the Philippines and Iran could certainly present their own challenges.
Yeah, that's so true. And Poletti, particularly with Philippines, I guess there's a bit of inside knowledge there, isn't there? Of course, we've got the Philippines coach there who has coached in the A-League Women's at Western United. Then you've got the likes of Angie Beard, and I think there's a couple of others who have come through the A-League Women's system. So, I mean, they're going to be right up for it, and they've got the knowledge of how some of our girls play and the way that they want to play. Do you think that adds a little bit extra to particularly this opening game against the Philippines?
Look, it like I said, we saw this game in Olympic qualifying, two and a bit years ago, and it was an 8-0 victory for the Matildas. I don't think I don't think history or otherwise it does a ton. I think I think the Philippines have changed the way they've played a little bit. I know the Matildas are going to change the way they play a little bit. They're set up tactically and formationally under Joe Montemuro, as we touched on, very fluid, very um, non no set system per se. Like he'll have things that he wants to do, but there's really no traditional way to describe it as he said last week in press conference. So no, I don't think it's necessarily an advantage or a disadvantage. I think it's just going to be the Philippines coming out to play because they want to make sure that they can, try to, maybe sneak through as the best third place team in the group. Match day 2, they could very easily take it to South Korea and cause an upset or a draw, and suddenly that changes the whole dynamic of match day 3. So, the Philippines will be up for it. I just don't think there's necessarily an advantage or a disadvantage. I will say I am so disappointed that Serena Bolden has been unable to recover from her ACL injury in time.
Mm.
Um, the, I did an interview with Serena a few years ago. Wonderful person, lovely human being, great footballer. Like, she lit up the A-League women while she was here. I was just so disappointed she's not going to get a chance to play here for the Philippines.
Yeah, it's an absolute shame, isn't it, when a tournament gets robbed of quite potentially one of its best players, and to know that she's such a wonderful human as well. It makes it doubly sad, I guess, in that situation. So, all our best to Serena. Hopefully, she's not too far off from getting back on the pitch, and I guess getting back to that opposition analysis. Japan. Are they the favourites outside of Matildas in your mind, Poletti?
They're the favourite, period. It's
Okay.
Japan, then Australia, then some crazy mix of China, North Korea, South Korea, and then there's
Yep.
everyone else. Like, it is clearly
Mm.
Japan 1, there's a gap. Australia 2, there's a gap. Here's everyone else. Then another gap, and then here's the rest. Like that
Yep.
is just the reality of how far ahead Japan are in the AFC. That it's the Matildas top their group and Japan tops their group. Like, they are on a collision course for the semifinals, and look, Australia has never lost to Japan in a semi-final match at the Women's Asian Cup. They've lost in every other time they've played, group stage, final, but they've never lost in a semi-final. But and I've said this so many times, it genuinely feels like it's beginning to lose meaning. But when I look at the potential Australia versus Japan matchup in the semi-finals, I absolutely cannot get that She Believes Cup game out of my head, where Japan were just on the throttle for 90 minutes, a 4-0 romping on neutral territory in the United States during that during that game. And I don't know if a screaming crowd of 70 plus thousand Australians here in Australia will make that much of a difference, because I think the gap is just so massive. And yeah, like you talk to someone like Aaliyah Blaney, who's now an assistant coach with Japan, who's previously the under-20s coach, here in Australia, for the young Matildas. And her philosophy was always, right, how do we catch Japan? How do we set up a team? How do we build a team so that we can keep up with Japan, so that we can grow towards closing the gap with Japan? And she was able to try and do that. And then eventually, she ended up getting offered an opportunity when Niels Nielsen took the role, and she absolutely leapt at that opportunity, and I don't blame her, to be honest. Like, she's she's the sort of coach that's going to make Japan stronger. Help build that program top to bottom. Not that it needs building is the wrong term to use, but help strengthen that program from top to bottom. And I think that's just, it's so unfortunate that one of our brightest coaches, particularly one of our one of the few female coaches, that are going at such a top level, is helping our main opposition in Asia.
Yeah.
So look, Japan's the threat. It will be the threat, which is why I suggested, and I'm certainly not the only one to have made the suggestion, that maybe finishing second in the group might not be the worst thing. It might mean more travel, but it might mean, but it would mean that unless there's a slip up in Group B, not Group B, in Group C, that you avoid Japan until the final, assuming you win all the way through. So, look, I'm sure Joe Montemurro will just want to win. He's not certain. He doesn't strike me as the sort of coach that's going to play games and try to manipulate. Because once you start trying to manipulate things and you're playing with danger, you're asking for trouble. If it happens naturally, so be it. But you don't try to manipulate. Things like that. Outside of Japan, look, North Korea are very much an unknown. Because no one knows hardly anything about North Korea. Like, I know Sam Lewis has written a couple of articles in the last couple of years, one for The Guardian in the last few weeks, one for the ABC a couple of years ago. Look, they're under 17 and their under 20 squads have been ripping it up there, at the Junior Asian Cups here, and then the World Cups as well. So, like, their junior stocks are absolutely skyrocketing. We just don't know how that's going to translate to senior, to the senior side, because they lost 2-1 to Japan on aggregate in the final stages of the Olympic qualifiers. And this is their first major tournament since 2010. Not 2010, 2011. Where after 5 of their players got suspended after positive drug tests. And then they didn't. They were banned from 2015 Women's World Cup. Didn't qualify for either the 2018 or Asian Cup or the 2019 Women's World Cup, and then sort of withdrew from global football over COVID, and they've only just started to come back in the last couple of years after COVID happened. So no one knows what to expect down in North Korea. China sort of on the downturn a little bit, but they've got Ante Milicic as coach, so he'll he's trying to get them back on the up. And then South Korea, look, the last time they played the Matildas, 2 wins here in Australia. It's not that South Korea are a bad nation. It's just I think the gap is starting to grow, but just grow just a little bit. And so I think it's not that they're not a threat, because they're certainly dangerous on their day. 2022 Women's Asian Cup, for anyone who remembers that.
Yep. Unfortunately, so
yeah. So it's 5 teams that are realistically, in contention to win this tournament, or go deep into the tournament. That being said, upsets happen in tournament football.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? And someone like a South Korea or a North Korea, for that matter, just with North Korea with their unknown factor, and South Korea, as you said, turning up on the day and just playing, getting that result. The two sides that are quite capable of it. China as well. They've always had such a strong program, but yeah, as you said, they're on the decline. But a wounded dog, so to speak, they could attack. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And with that in mind, Poletti, I'm going to get you to get your crystal ball out, and I'd like to ask you what a pass mark is for the Matildas in this tournament.
My pass mark or Football Australia's pass mark?
Ooh, I want your pass mark, Poletti, please.
I think make the semifinals and then have a competitive showing against Japan. Should Japan be the opponent that you run into in the semifinals, which, as we've just ran through all the permutations, seems like the most likely scenario. So that's my pass mark, is make the semifinals and have a competitive showing against Japan. If you win and you go through to the final, fantastic. You're going with house money from there, as far as I'm concerned, because we'll get into this in a little bit of a moment. But I don't think I've hidden where I think this tournament's going.
No. I think you've made it clear that it's Japan's to lose. Maybe if we can put it that way. Okay,
yeah,
brilliant.
Look, in my heart, I want the Matildas to win the tournament. My head says Japan's going to run away with this. It's not even going to be close.
Yeah, right. Okay, there you go. Yeah. I mean, there's it depends who you talk to, doesn't it? There's a lot of optimism for the Matildas, obviously, and I guess that might be the Matildas bias and potentially having the blinkers on, but then there's the reality that just how good Japan is, and the amount of players they got in the WSL, I guess, maybe is a small reflection of that. And the fact that their junior teams are just so strong, and it's just a production line that seems to just keep on going, in tune with the fact that the Japanese Federation invest so much into the youth development as well. So it's one of those things, and this is the end result when your national team is just so bloody brilliant to watch, aren't they? So I guess that's where it is with Japan. Now, going back to that crystal ball, Poletti, who's your starting side for the game against the Philippines?
Whatever's going to work. Legitimately, I don't know what Joe Montemiro wants to do. I know what I don't even know what I would do, right? Because I think you've got to play the game here of, like, do you look at the rest in the first game? Do you maybe look at it for the game against Iran? Do you maybe look at it for a quarterfinal, depending on the opponent? I think there's so many different permutations at play, that I legitimately could not tell you I know, I know this is a fun thing to do. Everyone makes predictions and stuff like that, but
Mm,
I legitimately, my answer is just whatever is going to work, and that's going to be, the same answer for every game. Whatever is going to work.
mm.
I wish I
Look,
could
it's
give you.
fair.
I wish I could give you
Mm,
something more solid.
no.
And to be fair, I probably should be able to, but I think, you don't know who's carrying niggles, who's sort of lacking fitness, lacking game time. Like Kyra Cooney Cross's minutes have been limited at Arsenal this season.
Mm,
Ideally, she's you're starting, one of your starting players. Like ideally, it's Cooney Cross, Gorry as the 2/8s in midfield, and Claire Wheeler as the 6. There you go. So I'm actually, I'm starting to give you a little bit of a lineup now. Like
yeah.
that's sort of like what I would do, but we don't, you don't know what Cooney Cross's minutes are like. Is
Mm,
is Fowler going to start? Is she not? Like she started for
mm,
Manchester City last week. Does Joe start her on Sunday? I don't know. I don't know the answers to those questions, and so like, what's the goalkeeping situation?
mm,
Was it simply just Macca choosing to do a gym session today, or was it, is there something else going on? Like I don't know. There's so many different variables. Does Steph Catley play centre back? Does she play left back?
mm.
What does that do?
Yep.
Is it, a back four of Catley on the left, Carpenter on the right? Like, I'll tell you, Carpenter's starting at right back.
Yeah, there
Um,
we go.
there you go.
Yeah.
Kurz,
We
Kurz,
can agree
Kurz,
on that. Yep.
Kurz your striker.
Yep.
Caitlin Ford your left wing.
Yep.
I've given you my midfield three. So you let me monologue
Okay.
and you let me talk myself into answering your question. You're very smart. I like that.
Brilliant. Yep.
Look,
Yep.
I just think there's so many variables that that's probably the best I can give.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's look, we can work with that. We can work with that. So then it's potentially if Catley goes centre back or left back. Let's say she goes left back. Is it Claire Hunt or Winnie Heatley or Alana Kennedy as your back two as your centre back? It could be any combination of those three, couldn't it? Really,
I'd go Hunt and Heatley.
Hunt and Heatley.
If you're
Yep.
going Steph Catley or left back, it's Hunt and Heatley, Carpenter on the right. If you're going Catley at centre back,
Yeah, that's when it gets difficult, doesn't it?
I'd put Caitlin Torpey.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
That's fair.
I'd put Caitlin Torpey. Um, there you go. And let's say Razzo's going to start at right wing. There you go. Convoluted
Yeah.
answer. And
Boom.
I've given you my starting outfield, and whoever's in goal is going to be whoever's in goals.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on the fitness of Mac or Arnold. So we've covered ourselves there. I think, Poletti. I think we've done a great job there. Let's be honest. You did the heavy lifting, though. I let you get there.
You let me
um,
monologue. You let me just
it's
get
all right.
everything out and into the ether, and I somehow made sense of it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. All right. Well, and I think you've covered off who wins the Asian Cup. So that's head is Japan, heart is Matildas, right?
Yep. That's yeah.
No
I'd
more to be
love to.
said on that.
I'd love to be more decisive and optimistic. I really would, but
Look, that's completely fair. You're being realistic. We can't all be living in Wonderland, I guess. We have to be realistic sometimes. So, all right. So look, I think that's a good note to end it on. I'll get you to plug Dubcast again once more for me there, Poletti.
yep. So dropping our Asian Cup preview on Friday morning. I've actually got to jump straight off this and start editing it, so that'll be fun. So dropping that at some point on Friday morning. We'll be then follow that up with with a review of the Matildas opening game against the Philippines, and then as I said, we're hoping to do daily content throughout the entirety of the Asian Cup. I have a spreadsheet. It's all listed out with everything going on. It's just whether we actually get around to doing it or not. So that's the plans. We're gonna have some fun content dropping throughout the tournament as well. Some point before the opening game, I've got a short that's going to go up on the YouTube channel and across the social pages with a bunch of fun facts about the Asian Cup, and I hope that add a couple of those throughout the tournament. In fact, I'll give you a little bit of teaser, so you know sort of what to expect from this. There are 23 teams that have competed, in the history of the Women's Asian Cup. Bangladesh will be the 23rd nation making their debut. at this tournament. There are two nations, Kazakhstan and New Zealand, who will be unable to add to their tally by virtue of being part of UEFA and the OFC, respectively. So, those are the sorts of fun facts you can expect. So keep an eye on that throughout the tournament as well. Hoping to have a couple of those. And then once the Asian Cup is over, the Dubcast doesn't stop because we'll be back to our regularly scheduled A-League Women's weekly reviews and discussions about everything that's going on impacting Australian women's football. So, we're here for the rest of the season. And then the episodes will be a little bit more infrequent throughout the off season, but we're going to have plenty of content. So yeah, if you can drop us a subscribe on YouTube or follow us on whatever podcasting platform you're on, if you enjoy our content, that'd be greatly appreciated because, once you hit certain milestones, that leads to monetization of content, which means we can invest into growing content more, particularly during the off season when there's not as much of it to go around.
Yeah, exactly. And keep Poletti and Burke doing the wonderful work that they're doing, because it's great to have a podcast dedicated solely to women's football here in Australia. It needs as much coverage as it can possibly. So make sure you get out there and support Burke and Poletti and the Dubcast crew. All right. Well, that is it for this special Matildas Asian Cup preview show. I hope you've enjoyed it. Make sure you get around us and Dubcast on whatever social media or podcast platform, I should say, that you're listening to this on. Thank you very much for your time, Poletti. Really appreciate it. All the best and go the Matildas.
Yep, no worries. Thank you so much for having me.